On this episode of Master the NEC, we're going to talk about why the electrical industry desperately needs certified thermal electricians and how misinformation from untrained thermographers is actually hurting customers, damaging trust, and in some cases, putting people at risk. Okay, so we're going to give you some real examples, some real numbers, some real scenarios, not hype on today's episode. Go ahead, folks. Let's go on and roll that intro music.
Welcome to the Master the NEC podcast, the ultimate destination for anyone passionate about the electrical trade. Whether you're a seasoned electrician, an eager apprentice, or just someone who wants to dive deep into the world of electrical work, you've come to the right place. Join your host, Paul Abernathy, a true authority in the industry with over 38 years of trade experience, as he electrifies your mind with in-depth discussions, expert tips, and valuable insights that will keep you ahead of the curve. Each episode, Paul will illuminate the complexities of the trade, decode the National Electrical Code, and share the latest industry trends, all while empowering you to take your electrical career to the next level. So, gear up, plug in, and get ready to supercharge your knowledge, because with the Master the NEC podcast, the power is in your hands. Now get ready. Here is your host, Paul Abernathy.
What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Master the NEC podcast. I'm your host, Paul Abernathy. And today we're going to be deep diving into a subject that is absolutely shaking the thermal imaging world. Look, if you're an electrician, whether you're a maintenance electrician, industrial electrician, even residential and commercial, if you don't know what thermography is, or if you haven't figured out how to incorporate that into your business, you need to think about doing that. Look, we've been doing this type of stuff for nearly 40 years. Most people know me as the guy who teaches you the National Electrical Code, but you'll obviously know that I have 40 years, coming up on 40 years in the trade. I've done thermography. I've troubleshoot a lot of things through my years, and obviously when I'm teaching, there's no way that I could teach these topics without being intimate with them and understanding them. And so when I set out to create the ultimate thermography for electricians type program, I was really looking at what was missing in the industry. And a couple things, and y'all know me, those that listen to me regularly know that when there's a problem and I see a problem, I usually go after it with both guns blazing. And one of the things that I started to see was that thermography is not new. It's been around for a while. And of course, the cameras today have gotten amazing. And if you haven't heard, we just did a partnership with Milesy. And so, we are going to be doing a extreme deep dive into their thermal imaging cameras. I've used their cameras. They're a great piece of equipment when they're in the right hands. Where in the wrong hands, they basically can give false, misleading information. And basically it hurts the industry if you don't have proper training. So, when I decided to create a program, one of the things I wanted to do was explain thermography from an electrician standpoint, because there's a big difference between somebody just saying they're a thermal imaging expert, they're level 1, level 2, level 3, but they're not always electricians. And that's a big deal for me, because majority of what I teach and what we go through in our programs, you have to understand the electrical basics. You have to understand the loading and amps and current draw and duty cycles. And there's so many things that you need to understand, voltage drop and how that can play effects on poor terminations or heat migrations. And all those things are critically important. And so when I set out to create a program, one of the core things was to say, look, I want to take electricians who may not understand what thermography is. They may not even have ever added it into what they do. In fact, you could have been working in electricity your entire career, and you might not have never put a thermal imaging camera in your hand. I tend to say that the electricians that don't embrace thermal imaging as a tool that they should have on their truck, just like any other tool they have, then you're missing out on being able to reduce time in troubleshooting, trying to find and be proactive in things that that your customer needs to be aware of. It can be a extremely helpful diagnostic tool. Obviously, it can't predict failure. That's why you're trained to look at something and look at the condition of use and look at the exposure and try to educate your customer. But at the end of the day, these are all tools that help you get a better picture of a situation. And so I set out to create a program because, you know what, even today, and I just experienced it today, there's so much misinformation. And when I got into this and decided I wanted to create a very detailed program on this with a bunch of examples for motors and transformers and giving you some temperature examples, again, thermal imaging cameras are not brain surgery. Okay. And understand it. Once you learn distances and reflection, emissivity, and understanding how to set these things and how to adjust for angles so that you're not actually reading it wrong, which may be, body heat or radiation or sunlight or reflection. And once you start understanding things like breakers and what their temperature normally would be, and so that you're not kind of crying wolf when you see something that's a little higher than normal, you're like, well, it's still maybe within the realm of the operation of the breaker. Understanding that the insulation rating on conductors, you may see a temperature and you're going to go crying wolf, and you're really not anywhere near the volatility of the insulation. We want you to understand those things without having to cry wolf, but we also want you to be able to identify things that you can tell your customer. And if you're in maintenance, preventative maintenance, these are things that you want to document for ongoing preventative maintenance. And that's why NFPA 70B is now really making it something that thermal imaging is an important component of that document. And it's now an enforceable document rather than just a voluntary document. So all these things are changing. And of course, with the advent of data centers and large equipment and large motors, the uptime is extremely important to the client. So being able to look at something and try to be a little predictive and help that customer is something that you need to learn, and all electricians should embrace it. If you think you know it all, you don't. And I promise you that you don't know thermography unless you've been involved in it, that type of thing. And I've been involved with it for years, and it's been part of my practice. And then when I sold all my businesses, I never thought that I needed to teach somebody thermography or introduce a program. But of course, y'all know I teach programs. So it just dawned on me, let's go on and create what I feel is the best, program out there. And I did not want to create a program that we teach building envelope, that we teach things like insulation. That's not my deal. I'm an electrician. Okay. I'm an electrician's electrician. I create stuff for electricians. And so that's what we did. And that's when we came up with the Certified Thermal Electrician. The trademarks are already filed. It's a program that's not going away. Just recently, we signed a partnership with Milesy Tools, which makes an amazing sets of thermal imaging cameras that we'll be talking about more in the future, even doing some videos on them so you can really see the difference in what's difference between low tier, professional grade, and how you can even use a much higher detailed unit for more stationary things like switchgear that allow you to get really high images that you can use in reports. But we'll cover all that stuff. But what I wanted to do was talk about some issues that I'm seeing and how misinformation can be spread by people that don't have the proper training. And look, I'm not bashing. I'm not here to bash somebody who says they're a thermal expert and they've been through level 1, level 2, level 3 thermography training at some other program. I'm not here to do that. I'm just sitting here to say, look, those training is always great. And, there are some amazing educators out there in the thermography world. I'm just saying we tend to want to deep dive in electrical. I support the CTEs, okay, in that because I am always going to be here to answer questions for them and give them the support as being part of our program. So there's more to that. They get an NEC consultant and they get somebody they can bounce things off of and review and look at images and give them feedback. Those type of things. That's what we wanted to create the program for. So let's kind of look at some things. We want to talk real numbers, real examples, real scenarios, no hype here, that type of thing. So let's break this down. So, okay, number one, let's look at this here. It's the rise of thermal experts. Now, in today's world, on TikTok, Instagram, eBay, whatever it is, everyone has a thermal imaging camera. They can just get them. And now they really, in the last couple of years, the prices have really come down. It was a time when a thermal imaging camera of any decent quality was going to cost you $3,000 and $4,000, and that's just not the case anymore. And in fact, many cases it's a total waste of money to go with something that is that expensive to do what we do in the electrical world. It's just unnecessary. But there are certain features that are beneficial. Like, for example, I highly recommend the TR20 Pro, which is from Milesy, because it's a dual camera setup and that type of thing. So it's actually going to have two cameras, one for the visible image and one for the infrared image. And that's going to be great for your reports. Not all cameras have that. Now, of course, you can do a thermal picture and then take a regular picture with a camera. That is also doable as well. But at the end of the day, if it's already built in, then it just makes life a little easier, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, everybody and their brother can get a thermal imaging camera today, but not everyone has the knowledge to use it. Now, all you've got to do is spend about an hour on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, and see people that are pushing the thermal imaging cameras. And, usually they're affiliates for the manufacturers, but they're pushing these cameras and they're just, shooting it around the room, taking pictures of their hand, looking at certain things, and they're trying to get you to buy it. And you look at it and you go, that's cool as shit. I want to have something like that because, again, this is technology that for years was out of our price range for most technicians. And so now they're available. The problem is nobody knows how to use it. They don't know how to use it. They don't know what the color patterns mean, the options in the color patterns, with the heat and how it transfers down a conductor, or where to actually, the angle to actually take the actual image. And they don't understand it. And so what happens is they get values that are misleading. They might not be high enough, or they might be too low. And they give this information to their customer. And then they start saying things like, look, you see this right here, this is a loose termination. Because of that, you're wasting energy because over time it's arcing and that's energy. And they start to take this customer down this, and that's misleading to me. Okay, so today, thermal cameras are cheap and more available than ever. If you go to our website, thermalelectrician.com, you will see under the info tab, you will see the ones that we recommend. And you can even get a 10% discount if you order. You're not going to buy through me, so don't worry. You're not giving your credit card to us. You click on it, you'll automatically get a pop-up that'll tell you about you getting additional 10% off. And if they're running a special, you get 10% off that special. Okay, so always keep an eye for the specials. I'm just saying. All right, now, people buy one and suddenly they think they're thermal experts. They really look at it and say, oh, obviously this is easy, right? The red or the white, depending on the scale. And they look at it and go, oh, that's a hot spot. That's a problem. They don't understand. They're taking readings and they're not even removing covers. They don't understand how to adjust the emissivity based on the material that they're scanning. They don't understand black body theory and what happens with the emittance of this energy. They don't get it. But yet they'll hold themselves out as a thermal expert. Now, look, I'm not here to tell people how to do their business, but what I am here to do is say that I can promise you that we want to make sure that, again, it's not brain surgery, but we want to make sure you have some viable examples, some temperature differentials, the delta T's, things like that in our course that you can actually use, and all you're doing is substituting what you experience in the field with the information that we give you. And we make it very plain and simple. Keep the lessons short in our courses because we really want to focus on the material, because I believe reading comprehension is extremely important. You can look at an image all you want and you can go get your own images, but you have to understand temperatures, okay? Colors are one thing, okay? But you have to understand temperatures, highs, lows, and how to do a peer review All these things are extremely important, not just look at colors, okay? Social media is, again, y'all know my love-hate relationship with social media, but that amplifies this issue. People post thermograms and they make bold claims without understanding electrical science. They don't get it, right? So look, just because somebody buys a $300 thermal camera does not make them a thermographer, and absolutely does not make them an electrical diagnostic professional. Now, you already have a leg up. If you're listening to this and you're a licensed electrician, you already have a leg up on most thermographers, okay, because you're an electrician. Remember, a lot of these thermal cameras are used by home inspectors. Home inspectors are in no way are they electrical experts. But you have people that specialize in thermography that went through a level 1, level 2, level 3 that never held an electrical license in their life. And do you really want that person making judgment on things and not understanding why this temperature might be what it is? Or look at a conductor and see the consistency, or understanding when you may have a phase in a 3-phase, it's overloaded, and why? There's so many things that you're really not going to get unless you've been in this trade. You understand it. And so that's why we cater to electricians, because we believe that they're in the perfect situation to be thermal imaging experts. And all we want to do is give them some examples in thermography to help spawn them into that career and add these services to their business. Okay, so look, you wouldn't hand somebody a megameter and suddenly call them a motor specialist. Okay, or hand them a megameter and all of a sudden, or give them a thermal insulation tester and all of a sudden they're an expert. Okay, same thing here. A thermal camera is a tool, not a qualification. You only get better as you work it. As you get used to seeing the images, as you get used to it, you will get better. And it takes time. It's not instant. Okay, so just because they buy a camera does not make them an expert. That's what we're going to try to do in our Certified Thermal Electrician program. Now, here's a problem. The problem with this industry right now, from what I've seen, and the reason that I spawned the creation of this program, and even the program that I made for the everyday consumer, because we have a thermal imaging beginners course that's just for anybody that buys a thermal imaging camera. Because you know what, if you're going to buy one and you're not qualified enough to be an expert, you at least need to know how to use one. And none of the manufacturers anywhere give you a very detailed course to understand emissivity and how it plays a role, and distance and position. And they don't give you any of that. So I felt it was extremely vital for me to create a basic program for people as well. So that somebody's going to buy that low-end $130 thermal imaging camera, that they at least get some basic understanding. And so we created a very extensive basic program that's available as well over on fasttracksystem.com. So anybody, that you don't have to be an expert, but let me tell you what, if you're just wanting to get into this, you should get that. It's like $69.95. And it's basically over 30 lessons or 30 modules. I mean, it's massive. And you'll get a lot out of it. I promise you. Okay. All right. So here's the deal. Let's use some real world examples. So recently I saw someone post on a social platform, and they made a claim that a 0.1 ohm loose connection. Okay. So it's 0.1 of an ohm. A loose connection was wasting, you ready? He made a statement that it was wasting $18,720 a year in energy. Okay? Just a 0.1 ohm loose connection. Now, I want you to think about that. How would they even know that to make that claim? Because you know what? To know that, you'd have to know how to measure the current. You'd have to know the duty cycle. You'd have to know if they quantify the voltage drop across that 0.1 ohm connection. No, they simply took a picture and made up some numbers, right? So look, a thermal camera shows heat. It doesn't show amperage, doesn't show power, doesn't show kilowatt hour costs, doesn't show any of that. Without knowing the load, you cannot calculate the I squared R losses. A very predictable formula. Amps times R. Okay? I squared R. You can't know these things unless you know what the measured current is, what the log of the duty cycle is, what the voltage drop is across that 0.1 ohm of loose connection. If you state otherwise, all you're doing is misleading somebody. You cannot convert temperature into dollars without real electrical measurements. Now, when people do that, and I'll be honest with you, in our programs, we go out of our way to explain how you explain things. In fact, we spend multiple modules explaining how to work with the customer, how to make sure you're providing them with accurate information and not snake oil. Really? Because you know what? The moment you do in this industry, the customer loses trust, contractors are misled, legitimate thermographers look unprofessional, and electricians start thinking thermal imaging is snake oil. And that's when you all of a sudden get people on Mike Holt forums and other forums all talking about it's snake oil. And they haven't a clue either how you use thermography. But they're easy to start jumping on that naysayers bandwagon because there's so many people out there that post things that aren't posting accurate information. The facts. Okay? Now, what makes a CTE or Certified Thermal Electrician? What makes them better? What makes them different? Okay, let's talk about that for a second. A certified thermal electrician through our program, first of all, they're an electrician. Second, is trained in both thermal science and electrical science. And they have people to reach out to assist them at any point that they're confused in the two. Okay? All right? Not just thermal science education, but electrical science education. Okay? Not one, but both. Now, CTEs understand loading characteristics, NEC-based principles, I-square-R heating, voltage drop, resistance faults. In our program, they also learn about thermal maintenance with NFPA 70B, and we also talk about conductors and terminal behavior under various loads. Okay? So the CTEs don't guess. They calculate, they measure, and they confirm the data before they make any outlandish claims. Now, again, I'm not here to scare other thermographers out there that do a great job. And there's many of them out there that understand these basic core fundamentals. But if we don't get back to making sure that we don't make outlandish claims without information. Now, temperature differentials or delta T's and all that's a proven science. We cover it. It's important to give them a heads up. It's also important to know when temperature is above an operating temperature of a piece of equipment. And that's all great. And even on our website, we give you some free tools, free calculators that you can use in the field. A delta T calculator, it looks for the difference in that. And we talk about that. It's all included, but we give you some calculators to help that along the way so that you make sure that whatever you're telling your customer is accurate. Because at the end of the day, it's if you've got to make things up in order to get the sale, then you're going about it all wrong. And you're liable to get that one sale, and somebody points out that that's just not how it works. And then the next thing you know, it's almost like engineering, right? How many times have you heard the person say, well, you know what? If we just take a car and we put motors and generators on the wheels and two in the front and two in the back, and when it's running, it's charged. The front wheels are charging one battery and the other one's charging the other. Or how about the person that says, well, let's put a wind turbine on it, and as you're going down the road, it'll spin the turbine, it'll charge. No, there's diminishing losses here. So you're burning energy to make energy, and you're burning it at a higher rate than you're producing it. And so it's basically a science of diminishing return. And so when people look at certain things and start making outlandish claims, because it seems like it's plausible and it's not, then that's just what gives everybody a bad name. Okay. I'm just saying. Okay. Let's look at some realistic, defensible examples. Okay. So let's set up this scenario. Okay. So let me walk you through a realistic example and a kind of certified thermal electrician would evaluate properly. Okay. So let's do this. So we've got a commercial panel board. We have feeder lugs running hotter than its neighbor. Okay. So we're doing peer review hotter. We got a lug that's hotter than the one that's next to it. Okay. So the CTE investigates, finds loose terminals. Okay. So finds a slightly loose terminal. They measure the resistance around 0.02 ohms. Load is approximately 80 amps is what's being loaded on it. And for 12 hours a day, that termination was loose. Now, let's walk you through the electrical math, okay, so we can plug in some numbers. Remember that I squared R ratio? Okay, let's talk about it. It's not internet magic, okay? It's not Houdini smoke and mirrors. We know what the loads are, okay? So it's 80 amps, okay? So 80 amps squared, that is I squared, amps squared. So I squared R. So 80 amps squared is 6,400. Multiply that by 0.02, because that's your resistance in ohms. You're going to get 128 watts. So daily, that's about 1.536 kilowatt hours. Annually, that's about 560 kilowatt hours. Okay. So it went from 1.536 kilowatt hours to over 560 kilowatt hours over the year. Now, if your rate or your power rate or energy rate was, utility rate was 0.14 cent per kilowatt hour, then that's going to equate to about $78.48 per year. And look, that's nothing to sneeze at, especially if you got a bunch of those going on. I mean, that's pissing away money. Okay. But that is nowhere near the example that the gentleman used online that was like 0.01. And here we're talking about 0.02, and we're basing it on an 80 amp load, and we're talking $78 a year. It's still nothing to shake a stick at, okay? It's still wasted. Now, there's something bigger, though, than just that. It's, again, nowhere near 18,000. Hell, it ain't even near 800, okay? It's basically $78.48, but the money's not the problem. It isn't. The real problem is what the heat does over time. Because heat rises a little bit, time goes on. As time goes on, as the heat, it continues to build up that heat. And what happens is you'll get to the volatile point of maybe not as much the lug, but the insulated conductors around it, or any of the material that may be exposed to the heat around it, maybe what the lug is mounted against, creates other issues over time. And of course, then you have a runaway or a breakdown, okay? So the real problem is, don't focus on the money, okay? Focus on the fact that this could be a future problem that's going to cost a lot more than $78 a year. If this system were to melt down, then we're talking thousands of dollars to fix an issue. So that's the kind of diagnostic you're getting. You're not saying when it's going to fail. You're not saying that it's failing next week. You're not into that. You're not a Nostradamus. But what you can tell them is this temperature is rising. And if they do proper maintenance and they do 6-month reviews where they take a picture of it and they take the different temperatures, or if it's really elevated, you make them aware of it right now so they can potentially mitigate it, then you're saving a potential issue down the road. Now, when is that going to happen? I don't think you can predict that. But again, we do know that over time, the heat is going to be the problem. Ultimately, things succumb when it's put to a certain level of heat, okay? All right, let's do another one. So a real danger we're going to look at. So let's talk about, it's really, the risk isn't the dollars. The risk is the heat. That's what you focus on. But you got to do it within the context of not blowing smoke. I mean, you need to understand what an overcurrent device operates at, or what an AFCI or GFCI operates at, or what the normal operation temperature is or what's considered acceptable. You need to understand that before you do, start calling out cry wolf. Okay. So let me walk you through it. So there are different things that can cause heating at that termination. Okay. You could have progressive oxidation. As the heat rises and continues to rise, the oxidation will get heavier and heavier. Insulation degradation, especially near the termination. And today I can tell you, as a person that is very much into the wire and cable industry, I've served as an expert to this industry for over a decade. I'm going to tell you that all the data centers and everybody wants that insulation brought all the way up to the lug, all the way up to the terminal, the connector, or whatever's going on. They don't want to see any of the conductive material. Well, the more you move that towards the lug, the more that the heat on a poor termination can transfer down, and you'll start having insulation degradation. Whether it's thermoplastic and it starts regressing and you start seeing little clear bubbles on it, that is the plasticizer migrating out of it. Or you start seeing it browning or turning discolored or real opaque when it comes to thermoset, which is like a cross-linked polyethylene. There's things that can happen. It doesn't melt, but it crystallizes on that cross-linked polyethylene, okay, XLPE. So degradation is going to reduce the lifespan of that insulation. Also, the heat, the elevated heat is also going to be transferred in. I mean, these are overcurrent protected device. And so they're going to have a trip setting. And again, when you overload it and you're putting too much heat on it, you're going to start getting breaker tripping. Equipment failure, internal parts melting down, and devices breaking. How many times have you heard stories of a breaker looks great from the front and the back, it's already melted all down? That didn't just happen overnight. That takes time. Okay? And you might say, well, why didn't the breaker trip right away? Well, because as I said, you could have a very low arc, a very low resistance arc, but over time the heat builds up, but it's not significant enough to clear the overcurrent device. Okay? Also, as components heat up, the potential for failure creates the greater potential for an arc flash potential. And we know how everybody's freaking about an NFPA 70E and arc flash and all this kind of stuff. You just run the greater risk if your terminations, if your connections, if your equipment is not in optimum running condition. So you have to be aware of those things. There's a fire risk associated with the elevated temperatures as well. Now, for most people today, like data centers and big commercial, the big money issue for them is really two things. One is the potential for equipment replacement, but the big one is costly downtime. This is why preventative maintenance is so key in taking records and documentation. We explain how you have a regimental program to go in there and take readings on a monthly basis. If it's very volatile equipment that must stay optimized, you want to make sure you do frequent thermal inspections and document it. Document the value, make sure you do it. This is why we use a lot with the TR384C. Why we use that thermal imaging camera, because it's actually a 25 hertz, so it's not as spiffy as like a TR20 Pro, which is like 50 hertz. The lower hertz means it's not really designed to do, moving things as much. That's because on that one, that's the one you put on a tripod and you put it on there and you take some readings as you ramp up some loads and you take really high definition readings. The issue here is in those data centers, they need to stay up and run. And there are ways to find weaknesses in the system, circuits that were overloaded because they didn't calculate it out for the various servers that are going to be on it. And you can't see it. And what are you going to do? You're going to wait for it to thermally break down? I know this because one of the reasons that I even ended up at Encore Wire was because of a data center that was in a big issue, plasticizer melting down. It was a big deal. And I was asked to step in and solve the issue. And ultimately, it was an engineer's design issue. But we would not have found that if we didn't do a detailed analysis. Now, I did not do thermal imaging on that. One, because I wasn't on the site. I reviewed the drawings and I reviewed data that they supplied. In that alone, I could find where the problem was. And I re-engineered the entire installation. and was able to identify it. Did that make the engineer happy? Absolutely not. Did the engineer finally admit he was wrong? Absolutely did. But I know that it got us as a wire and cable manufacturer off the hook because it had nothing to do with our wire. Okay. So impactful, a $78 energy problem can turn into a $78,000 shutdown or worse if you ignore it. So that's not a cry wolf. That is understanding how a problem can start and how it could potentially escalate if you don't make people aware of it. I'm not going to tell you it's going to fail tomorrow. But if I'm seeing values based on our training that are high, I'm telling you, oh, it's going to fail. I can't tell you when, but it's going to fail because the heat doesn't lie. Okay? You just need to understand how to understand the heat pattern, how it moves down the conductor, what's acceptable and what's not. You need to understand how to do the delta T. You need to understand how to do a peer review, quantitative and qualitative review. You need to understand these things in order to make a really good report for your customer. That's your responsibility. That's what you should have a responsibility to do that properly as a professional. So other examples that electricians will deal with when there is that heat rise, let's ignore the $78 because that guy who posted it on social media is full of crap. There's no 18,000. No. 0.01 ohm of resistance point over a year. No, nowhere near is that the cost. Now, could it cost way more than that $18,000 if the equipment goes down or something breaks down? Absolutely, it could. But that's not how he conveyed it. That's how you should convey it. So you've got burnt lugs, you got melted buses, you got failed breakers, you've got motor starters that fry because of loose terminations and loads. You got variable frequency drives that burn out prematurely because of loose connections or heat buildup. UPS, you've got CNC machine failures. These are very volatile, sensitive equipment that need to make sure they run at a certain value and, at a certain voltage as well. So you have voltage drop issues because of poor terminations. So look, it's not just a matter of throwing a thermal imaging camera on a situation. Electrician understands how to not only use the camera, but how to use a voltmeter, how to use an amp probe, how to be able to read that data, just as important as a thermal imaging camera. And a lot of times that's what separates the true electrical thermography expert from just somebody who has basic thermography training. And it's some of it out there is really good. Okay? Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to bash other training programs. They're great. They've probably been doing it longer than I have. My point is tailoring it for the electrician is a lot different than taking a course and then trying to learn about thermal envelope and then trying to learn about water and HVAC. It's a little different, folks. And that's what we only cater to. I don't care about those other things, to be honest with you. Now, our basic thermography course does get into some of those things because obviously people are buying these cameras, the low end, more affordable ones, they're buying them. Well, I think they should know how to use it. I don't want you to waste your money. But if you're somebody who wants to be a certified thermal electrician, you're beyond that. You're focusing electrical. That's your focus. Okay. Let's look at some stories, just kind of real world examples. How about this? There's been a situation where I've been to a job where the breaker looks totally fine until it didn't. How many times have you heard people say, well, it's fine. And that place has been like that. It's been like that for 40 years until it burns down, until something happens. And then it just happens. I mean, people are so complacent today, like, well, I've been doing this for 38 years. And I'm like, yeah, well, until something happens, it happens. A skydiver's done 20,000 jumps until his parachute doesn't open. Then he's a greasy spot on the ground. You get what I'm saying? When it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So, a breaker face looked normal. Thermal imaging showed a 40-degree above ambient behind the handle. Panel had to be de-energized. Once it was pulled, the lug was almost charcoal. Would have burnt the building down probably within months. or the only hope is that it was contained within the enclosure. Thank God that's why we have the enclosures. So thermal cameras see what the human eye cannot see. Now, there are literally videos out there now on YouTube. I've seen them where people have done it, offering how to use thermal imaging cameras for electrical. Folks, I'm not lying to you. Go and look on YouTube and things like that. There are people saying that you're doing it and they don't even pull off the cover. They don't mention, they just hold the camera there. They don't pay attention to the distance their way, which is very important. They don't pay attention to the angle. And they just put it up there and they see this red and they go, ooh, it's hot. That needs to be fixed. They have no clue. That breaker may be under load right now. There's a reason why it's running hotter, but is it running too hot? Do they know? But what I can tell you is you're going to see something hot. Your ass better be pulling that cover because the thermal camera can see what the human eye cannot. Okay. And in our case, I've seen plenty of breakers where the front looks perfectly fine. The back is totally melted out of it. It's still running for now. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm more than sure everybody in their career have had a breaker. The back ass end of it is totally burned away. And you're wondering, like, why the hell didn't it trip? Because it was a low current draw load. Over time, the arc built heat. It grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. It still wasn't enough to clear the overcurrent device, but it grew and grew and grew until it started getting past the volatility point and things started melting down. Eventually, hopefully, it would blow. That's the hope. I'm just saying. Now, there was a data center that had a feeder. It had a small resistant fault. The customer didn't want any downtime. They didn't want to shut it down. So the CTE logged the data, showed changes over weeks. And this is where it's really good to use the TR384C, is to do ongoing high quality imagery. Of course, the TR20 Pro will do it as well, but this is a prime example for a higher end specialty camera. Okay. So over the weeks, they kept it, and they would take these readings and they would get heat rise was trending. Same loads. It just kept going up, and it's running the same load characteristics. At that point, the customer authorized a shutdown. And when they went and looked at that location that kept giving them this constant rise, there was a lug that was nearly melted all the way through. Now, the customer authorized a shutdown so they could take data centers offline and support them other ways. They didn't just take customers offline. They rerouted it so that they could have this authorized shutdown, and then they felt this problem. What do you think would happen? And I'm going to tell you from my experience. Data centers, when they're down, if you just recently saw this issue that happened with Amazon and it was all down, the Cloudflare, due to one person's issue, even with it was programming, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars it cost them from a mistake. Folks, every single data center in the country should be doing thermal imaging on every volatile feeder that's going to this equipment. And they should be documenting it, and they should be able to look at, and what you'll see is a heat characteristic that either stays consistent based on the loading that is consistent, or it will rise. And when you start seeing a signature of a rise, that's where the preventative maintenance folks look at it. So again, for you data centers out there who are saying, look, we'll just ride that luck train until something breaks down. Okay. You keep doing you, boo, but eventually you're going to have that problem. Okay. So thermal understanding, electrical knowledge creates predictive maintenance, not preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance. Okay. They were able to shut it down without any customers losing their uptime, fix the issue, and then get it back online because they had a plan of attack. Okay. Cost them a lot less than it would have been to have it all of a sudden just shut down in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden, all these, they start getting these calls because Walmart's and the Google, all these places, all of a sudden their websites go down. If you don't think it won't happen, it did happen. In fact, ours went down. Our websites went down because of that Cloudflare shutdown. Okay. It happens, and you lose revenue, and hopefully you don't lose data. I'm just saying. Let's see here. No, so a customer where we had a customer where the contractor who they oversold the savings. Okay. So the thermographer told the customer they were losing $10,000 a year and that they needed to have a thermal imaging evaluation done because they're losing it. So the customer actually brought in somebody that was an expert in thermography, in electrical specifically, to verify. And at the end of the day, the actual loss was about $60 a year, not $10,000. Okay. So you trust the first contractor, all of that was now destroyed. The trust is gone. Now you better hope, because if it was me and I paid you 10 or you were lying like that, I may sue you, especially if I'm a big data center and I listen to that and I shut it down only to have somebody else say that's not the problem. It wasn't nowhere near that. Then I'm going to recoup my investment. I'm suing somebody. Okay. So misinformation in this case cost the reputation of the first thermographer because they were trying to sell fear and hype when, again, it was nowhere close to saving them $10,000 a year. Not even close. They just made it up. They just made the number up. Okay. I'm just saying. So why the CTE standard protects the industry? Why am I pushing so hard for this CTE? Why did I seek out partnership with MilC? One, they have over 400 patents in all different types of thermography equipment, measuring equipment. That's one. I wanted a partner that I knew they would have our back. That was the first thing. Now, the CTE, having a certified thermal electrician's credential, ensures professionalism. It protects the customer. It ensures that the thermal imaging can be trusted. No crying wolf. It keeps the untrained people from misrepresenting data, and it strengthens the electrician's value when it comes to thermography. Now, you've heard me say it. We have the CMECP program that for master electricians, that's a certified master electrical co-professional, because it elevates your brand. It lets you know, hey, folks, I'm better than the guy next door. Why? Because I didn't just stop at the gatekeeper to get my master's. I continued my journey in knowledge to become more proficient in my profession. That's why doctors become specialists rather than general practitioners. Same here with our CMECP program. Same here for the CTE, Certified Thermal Electrician program. If you want to offer it, sure, you could go out and get a level 1, level 2, level 3. What is that going to give you? Because if you're an electrician, you're not going to be beating down the home inspectors to try to do building envelope and water mitigation. No, you're an electrician. Specialize, folks. Specialize in what you do. Okay, it brings more value. Remember, the camera itself doesn't make you a professional. It's the training that makes you a professional. So look, at the end of the day, if you want to separate yourself from the pack, if you want to elevate your career, if you want to provide thermal imaging to the customers, and you want to be trusted resource, stop trying to promote it as a fear tactic. That's not what it's all about. A CTE will never do that. Now, the CTE program is where you need to be, because thermal imaging is not a guessing game. It's not entertainment. It is not Instagram or TikTok hype. It is electrical diagnostics powered by science, training, and understanding of the National Electrical Code. Yes, sir. Understanding of a conductor and ampacity and loading. The National Electrical Code is a minimum safety standard, but it is a gold mine of knowledge if you know how to maneuver that gold mine. Look, if you want more information on becoming a certified thermal electrician, if you need a thermal imaging camera, come to us. We can make sure that you get 10% off the best sale price out there. We can recommend the camera for you if you really are serious. If you want to go buy this cheap thing for $100, you do you. The one problem with those is you're not going to get dual imaging. You're not going to get the higher refresh rate. You're not going to get the bigger LCD screen. You're not going to get the higher refresh rate. You're not going to get feature-laden different palettes, a high level of palette, and you're not going to get the resolution. And it's not going to be digitally or faked like digital zoom resolution. You need higher resolution. And we offer cameras across that full spectrum. And again, we negotiated 10% off, not the MSRP, 10% off of the best price that they offer. And they offer specials all the time. You're going to get an additional 10% off of that. That's what we do. That's the negotiation. That's what we try to do with our partners. Okay. All right. Hopefully you got something out of that. Again, misleading. Let's stop. If you want to get into thermal imaging, do it right. Do it right. Don't sell snake oil. Don't try to mislead. Don't try to earn somebody's business by, them saying, "Oh, we're going to save you $10,000 a year," or "Oh, that problem cost you 10." No, that's so far off the extreme scale that if somebody's buying because they thinking they're going to get a return on investment, then you have high expectations to live up to. That's not what I'm here. What I'm here to do is to see whether or not we can offset potential failures down the road by doing some predictive maintenance and understanding the temperature curves of what we have now versus an ongoing analysis. If you're in the maintenance field, if you're an electrician that's going in for service calls, you're looking for things right now that have a problem. If you're in commercial work or motors, you're trying to make sure that you're going to keep these motors running at optimal performance, that you don't have any predictive problems that you could prevent by getting ahead of the curve. It's all about the uptime, folks. It's not about the money you save at the end. Don't sell your customer that they're going to make money on it, right? Don't say, "Look, this will cost you $1,500, but it's going to save you $10,000. That is not the right approach, folks. Not what we're here to do. No, we're worried about the bigger picture. The equipment failure, the downtime, the replacement costs, the potential fire, the potential hazards. That's why we're using thermal imaging. We're trying to get ahead of that curve. And it's not just as easy as looking at a bunch of colors on a screen. You have to understand how to do it properly. And you need great examples. And in our course, we give you examples that you can use. And all you got to do is plug in your real world examples into the same examples we give you in the course. We keep it simple and light. It's not like you're reading an encyclopedia. We also have what's called Fast Tracks Interact built into it. So for the lifetime of the program, or you're in it, you get to ask us questions and share images with us right in the Fast Tracks Interact. You can even share one of your thermal images and say, "Hey guys, can you take a look at this? Do you think this is a problem?" And we will give you advice on that. We'll ask you a bunch of questions because we are hoping that you know how to do all that. And we show you what you need to find out before you do any of that, because you need all the information. But God's sakes, don't make it a money thing. Don't say, "Oh, well, this resistance is costing you this over a year." No, it's a different. Focus on the safety. Focus on the hazard. Focus on the downtime. Focus on the replacement costs if it does happen. That's where you need to be. Don't try to sell them on something thinking you're going to save them a bunch of money, because that's snake oil, and that gives everybody a bad name in the industry. Okay? All right, folks, hopefully you got something out of that. Until next time, stay safe. God bless, and we'll catch you on another episode of Master the NEC. Peace.
Thanks for tuning into another electrifying episode of the Master the NEC podcast. We hope you're feeling more powered up and ready to tackle the electrical world with the knowledge and confidence you need to succeed. Remember, in the electrical trade, knowledge is power, and we're here to make sure you stay plugged into the latest insights, tips, and code updates. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your fellow electricians and industry pros. Until next time, keep your tools sharp, your circuits clear, and your mind focused, because here at the Master the NEC podcast, we're all about sparking your success. Stay safe, stay smart, and keep mastering the trade. From all of us here at Electrical Code Academy, thank you for all your support, and we will see you on the next amazing Master the NEC podcast episode.